This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson.
Yes, hello, and welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. I am your host, Harry Wilkinson, here to talk to you about the days and weeks events, the media, entertainment, health and education, all of it. And we look at it from a spiritual perspective. We look at it from a way of expanding our power spiritually, expanding ourselves, expanding our minds, and understanding the truth of who and what we really are. The truth of our more than physical nature is the best way I can think to put that right now. And it's always a pleasure to be able to do that. I do the show for me as well as anybody else who happens to be listening, because it helps me to really remind myself about the truths of our nature. And it helps me to really focus on understanding our connectedness, understanding that what we are creating here in this space is an extension of, or a creation of, who and what we really are, but is not the truth of who and what we really are. They're shadows, reflections, they're holograms, if you will, where we get to play and explore and experience things, experiencing them, granted, as though they were real, because that's the value of the experience. Is it's always a lot more fun to be on that roller coaster when it really does scare you, even though you know that you're safe. It's always a lot more fun when you go to a movie in which you really get absorbed into the story and you really start to react to the characters and feel what they're feeling, even though you know it's just a movie. These are the kinds of experiences we create. And looking at them from the spiritual perspective of that aspect of it really helps to put it in perspective for me. Now, there are people who think that is going a bit too far, and I understand. I understand how you could think that. How you could think that that's rather delusional, to think that nothing that's going on is really real. However, the truth of the matter is, and if you look at it even from a scientific perspective, certainly if you look at it from what we know from quantum physics, you'll see this is actually what is happening. There's a very physical, concrete, well, as concrete as quantum physics is able to get, blueprint for the fact that we are creating the world around us, and that we create it from I believe, a higher perspective. And there are many well-known writers, well-known philosophers, metaphysicians, if you will, who agree with that. It's a concept, I think, that more and more people are understanding. I see it being incorporated into science fiction stories, movies, and so forth. Perhaps one of the more famous examples of this is maybe The Matrix, at least the first Matrix. This idea that you're living in this sort of world that is not real. It's a hologram, and it's sort of been created, and those around you believe it's real, and then something happens, something odd happens, and gets you to start questioning. Something just doesn't seem right. It just doesn't seem like this is... There's something off here. And the more you explore, the more you begin to realize that, hey, you know what? This so-called reality isn't as real as I thought it was. That's the spiritual process, I believe. And that's what I like to talk about on this show. So, instead of talking about what I talk about, how about I just talk about it? Okay. So, of course, the big news this week has been the inauguration, or re-inauguration, if you will, of President Barack Obama. The second time for the first African-American president. I'm here in Washington, D.C., and I did get a chance to see the inauguration and the goings-on. Very powerful moment. Some tried to downplay it as being, wasn't as many people on the mall this time around as it was the first time around. I found it to be as powerful a moment, if not more powerful, than the first time. For a couple of reasons. The fact that the first African American, or I will say the first president of color, was elected, and he completed his term without being discredited, although there are many who still seek to do that and think that they have, without being run out of town on a rail, and without being assassinated, as many feared might happen, is something remarkable in and of itself, considering the history of these United States. And to have him reelected for a second term, as some commentators were saying now, has normalized the entire situation. It's a step closer to actually being able to elect and vote for someone and not be concerned about their race, and not be concerned about their religious affiliation or their gender. It's a step closer to that. It was a moment that I think transcends both the man, Barack Obama, and the presidency itself. And what I mean by that is, whether or not you agree with President Obama's approaches to things, whether you agree with his politics, whether you agree with his agenda even, isn't the important thing here. The important thing is that we've reached this moment of milestone. And it is a transcendent moment. It's a moment that marks a change in our society. It marks, as I said, a step closer to the fulfillment of not only Martin Luther King's dream, quite appropriate on his birthday, by the way, but our dream, our visualization, our creation of a world in which we understand our oneness, and it's no longer a, quote, big deal, unquote, to elect an African American or a woman or a Hispanic or any other so-called minority into a position of power. It marks a turning point. It's as I say, I would call it a mile marker. We've reached this point in our time, and that is transcendent. It's transcendent above the presidency, even, because While the presidency is certainly an important position in the world, in worldly matters and all of those things, and the honors that are conferred upon the president are time-honored traditions and so forth. What truly matters is the sense that we have of coming together around this creation of ours, this creation of leadership, and communing with that and saying that, this is a day when we honor someone who is different, perhaps, from ourselves, or not so different. We honor our ability to choose someone to lead us. Someone who may not be everything we want him, or at some point her, to be, who may not share all the same values that we have, but our commonality overshadows our differences. I've talked about how we create moments on a spiritual level. Not, as I say, not on a conscious level, but at the very highest level of our being, we create moments like these to experience who and what we really are, to reaffirm our oneness, to find our connectedness, and to rise above the illusions we have created. And that's what a transcendent moment is. And I've said the same thing about tragic moments as well. It's the same thing at work. Tragic moments like the shooting at Newton, Connecticut, the same kind of thing is going on. We're creating an experience that connects us to our oneness. When you feel the pain of someone else losing their child, when you connect with an understanding of our commonality through these events, that's what they're for. That's what we create these events to do, to expand our awareness. And so, looking at it from that perspective, it's not about liberal versus conservative, although there's that aspect to it. It's really about a reflection of our highest and best selves, the best that we can be. So I think I've said enough about that now. There was an interesting guest on. He's the Latino poet of his generation, or so he's referred to. His name is Martin Espada. He's a Puerto Rican poet. And he read a poem of his that he wrote on the occasion of the president's inauguration. And I encourage you to go and listen to him. Listen to this. You can find it at BillMoyers.com, and you can search for Martin, Martin, Espada, Espada, and you can watch it online on your computer if you have access to that. I highly recommend it. It's a lovely poem, and it really does capture that moment very well, and the transcendency of that moment, exactly what I'm talking about here. So I encourage you to find Martin Espada online there at billmoyers.com. Let me see if I can pull up a little bit of that poem that he read, and I won't give you the clip, but I'll read it to you myself so you can hear a little bit of it, and then you can go and hear the actual poet actually read it, with probably a lot better than I can do. But let me see what I can find here. Give me a second here, because it really was a wonderful take on a moment that filled him with pride, and he compares it to, he actually wrote this poem at the grave of Frederick Douglass to kind of show a passage or a marking from the time of Frederick Douglass and what he stood for, this man who came from being a slave and a poor man and worked his way up to being one of the great intellectuals of American history. And so that's where he takes this poem I cannot find the words here, though, unfortunately. But I encourage you to go and find it on billmoyers.com and listen to it. You can listen to the whole interview that Moyers does with him and his reading of this poem. It's truly lovely. It's a lovely, lovely. Oh, wait, here it is. It just came up. Oh, okay. Here, I can read a little bit of it to you. Here we go. The headline says Obama wins. This is Martin Espada's. This is a bit from Martin Espada's poem, Litany at the Tomb of Frederick Douglass, Mount Hope Cemetery, Rochester, New York. And he wrote this actually at the first election of Obama when he won. The headline says Obama wins. This is the stillness at the heart of the storm that began in the body of the first slave, dragged aboard the first ship to America. Yellow leaves descend in waves, and the newspaper flutters on the tomb like the sails Douglas saw in the bay, like the eyes of a slave closing to watch himself escape from the tide. Believers in spirits would see the pages trembling on the stone and say, "Look how the slave boy teaches himself to read. I say a prayer, the first in years, that here we bury what we call the impossible, the unthinkable, the unimaginable, now and forever. Amen." That's the part I really liked, because it talks about the transcendency of this moment when we realize that what we've been calling impossible all along is not. And whenever there's a breakthrough like that, when we start to understand our own power, and that there is nothing that is unthinkable or unimaginable, and nothing that is impossible, when there's a moment like that that we create to remind ourselves of that, that is a joyous moment indeed. So again, I encourage you to go find this Martin Espada poem and listen to the Bill Moyers interview with him. It's fantastic. So these moments that I've been talking about are moments that connect us, moments that remind us, and moments that make us feel as though we have, again, as I say, created something that is beyond what beyond what we understand with our limited material minds. And what this reminds me of is the theory of Akashic records, which comes from the Theosophical movement, and it comes from the word Sanskrit Akasha, which means sky space. The Akashic records are supposedly a mystical compendium of knowledge that exist in a non-physical plane of existence. And the reason this really connects with me right now is that, we've had this idea of the Akashic records, this knowledge of all human experience and the history of the cosmos, this universal supercomputer. It's also been described as the mind of God. Psychics and intuitives have talked about the records, and they assert that they're constantly updated automatically and are accessed through hypnosis or intuition or even astral projection. And it's become a very popular term to use in many spiritual circles. As I said, it was really kind of promoted by the Theosophical Society, which was a very big movement back in the 19th century and into the early 20th century. One of the major prophets of this particular movement, the Theosophical movement, was a woman named Madame Blavatsky, and it came out of a exploration and a popularity of clairvoyance and spiritualism, not spirituality. It's often funny to me that spirituality and spiritualism are used interchangeably. Spiritualism is the belief in spirits. That's what spiritualism is. Now, spirituality may include a sense of spiritualism, but spiritualism is the belief that spirits exist beyond the physical world after we die, and that they can be communicated to. And that was something that Madame Blavatsky promoted. But I don't want to get into the history of the Theosophical Society right now, other than to say that members of the society conducted research into the Akashic records and claimed that they were able to access them. But the idea of the Akashic records is so interesting to me now, and it should resonate to anybody who understands what the cloud is. In fact, the Sanskrit word Akasha, from which Akashic records comes from, means sky space. It's literally the cloud. And if you don't know what the cloud is this virtual space in which we store computer records, in which we store music now, we store our video files, we can store everything in the cloud. Wow. And now how is that for actually physically creating an Akashic record that I think mirrors the actual Akashic records that people have talked about for centuries. Fascinating idea, isn't it? Okay. Well, we'll talk about that more later. But I think these concepts, I think this memory that we may have, this cosmic memory, are the things that compel us to do the kinds of things we do, like the search for life on Mars, which I'm about to talk about right now. We're spending quite a bit of time right now looking at Mars. We've got the rover up there, and we've got scientists, the best scientists we can find, exploring Mars again. We've been doing this off and on for quite a while, but there's a concerted effort, and there's progress being made. The latest being a crater on Mars showing evidence of an ancient lake. that may have existed, and which means that it may have had life within it on Mars, and the possibility that it may still live there. And here's the thing: the water lurks under the crevices, or they believe the water is under the planet's surface, because for years the common wisdom was that the surface of the planet Mars was so dry and arid that it couldn't support life. But what they're finding is that water, it's looking more and more likely that water is seeping and existing under this crust of arid land. And that life, as they say, wherever there's water, you will find life. That life is existing under the planet instead of on the planet. Fascinating, isn't it? And so this is where the focus of their research is starting to go. This crater is called the McLaughlin Crater. It's about 57 miles wide and so deep that underground water appears to have flowed into the crater at some point in the distant past. And this is all coming from images that NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter has shown. These pictures of this crater on Mars. So what they're saying is that this crater is dry, but there are clay materials that evidence liquid that may be underneath it. And so a theory has been around for a while, but now is starting to take more, starting to be taken more seriously, that life may be existing under Mars. This article, which you can find on space.com under Giant Mars Crater, says that space agencies have deployed many missions to Mars over the decades to explore how habitable its surface may have been or is today. However, the Martian surface has been extremely cold, arid, and chemically hostile to life as we know it for most of the history of Mars. Instead of scanning the surface of Mars for life, scientists have suggested the most viable habitat for ancient, simple life may have been Martian water hidden underground. Now, on Earth, microbes up to 3 miles or more underground make up perhaps half of all of the planet's living matter. Most of these organisms represent some of the most primitive kinds of microbes known, hinting that life may actually have started underground, or at least survived there during a series of devastating cosmic impacts known as the Late Heavy Bombardment that Earth and the rest of the inner solar system apparently endured about 4 billion years ago. Fascinating how they know that stuff, isn't it? So, the deep crust has always been the most habitable place on Mars and would be a wise place to search for evidence of organic processes in the future. And this is a quote from a scientist in this article. I've been saying that, they talk about the search for life on Mars. They talk about the search for life in outer space. And to me, it's not about whether there's life out there. It's about how you define life. Because clearly, you can look at a planet, as we have begun to look at Earth finally, as a living organism. Planet Earth is a living organism. And so the other planets out there are living organisms as well. So, of course, we already know there's life out in outer space because we see the planets that are living organisms. It's not really so much about us discovering life in outer space as perhaps redefining or expanding or becoming more aware of what life is when we say the word life, and finding a new meaning of that word. So they don't have any way to drill underground on Mars right now. However, they can analyze rocks that they exhume, and they can make some pretty good estimations using mineral composition and so forth that they're finding in this crater. So as I've been mentioning on this show, we're getting closer and closer to that day when science gives its final decree on the idea that life does exist elsewhere. And that's going to do it for me today for the Spirit and Wellness Show. I hope you've enjoyed my take on things. I always love to hear from you, so please contact me at my Facebook page or here at Spreaker.com. Love to hear from you. Have a wonderful week. See you next time.